Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk doing my best John Hodge impersonation. Can you see my nose hair and my boogers?
I don't have any nose hair. I do not think that is a fair assessment. It's the least pleasant 2 minutes of my month, but I wax to ensure that I do not have any nose hair.
Oh boy.
I had to give it to you. Props, Hodge. You did turn around your East semifinal Bombers analysis video quickly, but I'm like, oh my God, Hodge is all up in my grill on this screen, dude. Jesus.
I like the aesthetic because when I went to the site and the video was in the video player, it looked like I was trying to crawl out of the screen and attack me, and we're coming off Halloween. So I thought this is perfect. People are
You're
probably
like the girl from The
loving
Ring?
seeing this. Yeah, it's like The Ring. I mean, different aesthetic from the person. I do not have long, measly hair, and I'm not a contortionist. I'm barely a torsionist. I can't move my body that well. But what I did like was that aesthetic of like, boom, I'm up in your grill, I'm popping out of your screen. You got to watch this video and this analysis of what was a great playoff game. It really was.
Hopefully for those listening to the audio version, they can understand what we're talking about. If you don't, just go to the website, and I'm sure John Hodge's big mug in our video player will pop out. So I decided to start this podcast with my face as close to the camera as I could get it.
Well, hopefully we didn't see your nose hair.
We're burying the lead here, though, boys.
You said no.
I don't think I saw any.
When's the next baseball game? You guys got to keep me updated.
Yo, speaking of baseball, how about John Hodge taking some high heat and throwing right back at Mike O'Shea?
Woo! That's true.
We had a good exchange. I didn't think it was hot heat, but I mean, you're entitled to your opinion. You watched the Avail.
Sorry, maybe I shouldn't say hot
called
heat,
it a good,
but I'm saying
a good catch.
He called out, your catch-all. No, you called out his catch-all when you were asking about his contract, which he never likes to discuss.
Well, I asked him if he was optimistic, and he said, I'm optimistic about everything. So I said, oh, so that could mean you're optimistic about leaving. And he kind of paused and he went, yeah, that's fair. Good catch, which, by the way, is regrettably for me the first time a football coach has ever said to me the words good catch.
Yo, think about that. Not only was it a football coach, arguably the best coach in the history of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and a professional coach said you had a good catch.
Yeah, I got to put that on my resume. 2-time Grey Cup winning head coach complimented my catching ability. That's how good at catching I am. Boom. Boom. We're making catches today on the 3DownNation pod.
You could be the catcher for the major league pitcher while he throws pitches to JC Abbott.
For JC, pitches that will literally spin JC around like a top.
Yeah, like JC, okay. Did you watch any of Game 7?
God, no.
You did not. World Series. Okay. Do you think you could hit, let's say, Shohei Ohtani, who has 7 different pitches, bro? What about Yoshinobu Yamamoto? You think you could hit him? That guy threw just under 100 pitches, turned around the next day, and threw a whole bunch to help the Dodgers close it out.
I don't know if Jason knows that 7 pitches is a lot. I think he's confused by that.
True.
Here's the thing. I am not my argument is not a skill-based one, and it is not even a hit-based one. I'm saying if I just swing the bat in roughly the same spot 100 times, at some point a ball is accidentally going to hit it. That's all I'm saying. There's no skill involved. It's pure luck. I'm just saying by the law of averages, if I swing it in the same spot 100 times, they'll miss by enough of a margin at one point that it'll hit it.
I think this baseball bit is played out, but we should take a moment to congratulate the Los Angeles Dodgers on their amazing luck in winning the luck-based event that is the World Series.
Hey, Sportsnet said the best team didn't win, so maybe the best hitter will win, or the worst hitter will win on this day when I'm up to bat. Could be.
Yeah, let's just move on. Hodge is right. It's played out. Let's get to the show. We're discussing Shawn Oakman's suspension being announced the same night that the Blue Jays had a massive World Series Game 6.
Trash talk between CFL playoff opponents.
Nathan Rourke closing the door on a future return to the NFL.
Tyrell Ford's new big shiny contract with the Edmonton Elks.
The CFL awards finalists.
And the league moving up the season in 2027. But first,
make sure you subscribe for the 3DownNation newsletter. Go to 3downnation.com. On the top right part there, plug in your email, get all the goodies straight to your inbox. Let's move it on to the show, boys. For the first time since 2019, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers will not be competing for the Grey Cup as the blue and gold fell 42-33 to the Montreal Alouettes in the East semifinal, despite a third quarter surge where Winnipeg actually took the lead. Quarterback Zach Collaros has already expressed his desire to play the final year of his contract in 2026 and insists he doesn't feel like this is the end of an era, but is the 37-year-old viewing this through, let's say, blue and gold colored glasses? And do you feel like it's the end of an era in Bomberland, Hodge?
Let's start with Zach. His avail was Sunday. I was there. I thought that Zach did a really nice job of breaking things down. He felt frustrated this season. That was visible and obvious at points. He obviously didn't have his best year. And I think, 17 touchdowns, 16 picks, I believe were the figures. Essentially identical, by the way, to what he did last year. And he pointed to the passing game challenges not just being a 2025 thing, but a 2024 thing. Now, he was very diplomatic. He didn't point any fingers. He did point one at himself, which I thought was warranted. I mean, I don't think Zach played terribly this season, but he wasn't up to the MOP level we've seen him at previously. But he also made it clear he didn't feel like the personnel was lacking elsewhere, which to me is a pretty clear indictment of the coaching without explicitly saying it was the coaching. There was some criticism of the coaching. He said that the offense repped things during training camp that they never repped during the regular season, which is kind of a red flag. He also said, he didn't feel like the passing game was really good at anything. Like he said, on 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5, when you need a first down with the game on the line, you need to have a play or a concept where it's like, well, this is what we're going to because we know that we can execute it. And he said there wasn't anything like that. So offensively, there's work to be done. And I think that, the Bombers need a retool here. There's certainly mistakes that have been made, some of them dating back further than just the last 8-9 months. Letting Jermarcus Hardrick walk, obvious mistake. He's been brilliant for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Letting Kenny Lawler go, obvious mistake. Should have paid him to stay as the top target in the Canadian Football League. Some things, I don't think the team really deserves blame for. Bringing back Dalton Schoen on a reduced deal this year. Dalton Schoen was effective through the first portion of the season. Unfortunately for him and the team, he suffered another ACL tear. Chris Streveler, struggling a little bit. Fair enough. Maybe that's coaching, but he obviously another ACL tear. That's not something that's the team's fault. So honestly, I'm a little surprised, guys, about the negativity that's surrounding this team. Not so much from coming inside the market, but outside of the market. And I appreciate fans of other clubs, particularly Rider fans. There's some schadenfreude. I get it. People are sick and tired of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers being in the Grey Cup. It's only natural that they're excited they're gone. I busted a gut laughing, by the way. I don't know who this user was, but we posted our Bombers eliminated graphic on Instagram, and somebody replied with a GIF from the third Star Wars movie where the rebels are playing. They fashion musical instruments out of the Empire's helmets, and they're all singing and celebrating, almost like the insinuations that the Bombers are the CFL's version of like Darth Vader and the Star Wars Empire, and they've finally died and gone away. I was laughing. But honestly, I don't see this as the end of an era. Obviously, a decision has to be made about general manager Kyle Walters, head coach Mike O'Shea, who, by the way, is optimistic he'll be back. I think will be back. Remains to be seen for sure. But this team is not far away from getting right back to the Grey Cup. They just went into play the Montreal Alouettes, a team that arguably is the best team in the CFL, right? Especially when Davis Alexander is healthy. They went undefeated. Tremendous defense. And the Bombers, like I would be concerned if they completely rolled over, right? If they're down 25-3 and the game ends like 55-10. It's like, holy smokes, this is the end of an era. This is a team that went in, got kicked to start the game, and then rolled over like dogs. That's not what happened, right? They charged back, they got the lead. Like we got to put some respect on Montreal, and I think we have to have some perspective here. I think this is a team that needs to retool a little bit. Again, there have been some personnel mistakes, there's been some coaching mistakes, but this is not a team that I see as being that far away from getting back to a Grey Cup. Arguably, it's a good thing for the CFL the Bombers aren't back. Again, I think people are sick of that. Unless you're a hardcore Bomber fan, you are probably refreshed to see somebody new going and representing the respective divisions this year. But I don't see this as an end of an era in Bomberland. I really don't.
I do want to start by giving the Bombers credit for their fight in that East semifinal. After the first half, I thought they were done, dusted, put to bed, and it showed a high degree of resilience, and I think it showed the character of that football team and the culture that Mike O'Shea has imbued them with for them to fight back in the manner that they did. But with all due respect to what they accomplished in that game and to you, Hodge, if this isn't the end of the era, you can see it from here because they are further away now from where they were than they were last year. And last year, they were further away than the year before. I think this is a team that has been in decline now for the past couple of years, even though they kept making Grey Cup games. And they are in steady decline at this point. Ultimately, they were a fourth place team in the West Division. They were a crossover team. Let's not be around the bush about that. And I think they have some serious flaws that have to be addressed, some mistakes that were made, some areas that need to be improved on the roster. And my question, when you hear Zach Collaros' comments and him talking about coming back, is that really what's best for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? I think you can make that argument because there's not much else out there on the market. But is a 37 turning 38-year-old Zach Collaros, who has been almost 1-for-1 touchdowns and interceptions for 2 seasons now, and has, by his own admission, not played particularly well, on a $600,000 contract, worth it for next season? What does that limit you to as an organization? Are you able to do the things that you need to do to get back to a Grey Cup game when you are under the weight of that contract from a quarterback who is not playing well enough right now? I think that's a serious question that the Blue Bombers have to grapple with. I'm not sure that they can get out of that deal, or at least not fully out of that deal, because I assume there is some guaranteed money as it gets the final year of Zach Collaros' contract, and he will have some of those guarantees written in that's going to limit what they are able to do in terms of a renegotiation potentially. But they have their hands tied behind their back right now because they don't necessarily have the next guy in-house. Could be Taylor Elgersma, but he's not under contract yet. And I think their current quarterbacking situation is not good enough and is in fact hurting the team based on its cost. I don't know how you can get better next season with that still being the case.
I'm going to take the other side of this because I think Zach Collaros absolutely still has the ability to lead this football team to a Grey Cup and win it. And some people might laugh based on his Grey Cup record, but let's not get caught up in recency bias here. Like, he was a very key cog in leading this team to 5 straight Grey Cups. And I don't think $600,000 is really out of the question for a quarterback of his caliber. And you consider the things that he had to deal with. Hodge alluded to it a little bit. You know, they decided not to re-sign Jamarcus Hardrick, and he's likely going to go on to be the CFL's most outstanding offensive lineman. They decided not to re-sign Kenny Lawler in a year where the team was hosting a Grey Cup. Zach Collaros loves Kenny Lawler and the ability that he has to go get the deep ball. Lawler does his thing and goes to Hamilton and is second in receiving yards and first in receiving touchdowns. Like, had an unbelievable season. And then arguably, his favorite target, Dalton Schoen, suffers an ACL injury. So he's left without two major targets. And I know it's 2 years removed, but a key position at right tackle that has not been filled anywhere close to the level of Jamarcus Hardrick. Then you have a first-year offensive coordinator in Jason Hogan, who, Caleros has talked about a little bit, but Brady Oliveira seemed to have some words in terms of him wanting to get the football more. And talking about it there, that's what I can't understand about this football team is the defense I thought was really good. And if they would have committed to running the football more, especially after Dalton Schoen was out, and then, Nick Dembski was having injury issues, and Ontario Wilson, I don't think is at the level yet where he can be a legitimate number one receiver. Why are you not running the football more with Brady Oliveira, who, oh, by the way, is the reigning MOP and MOC? To me, that's where I feel like this Bombers team lacked an identity. We knew the defense was going to show up for the most part, week in and week out. But offensively, you didn't know. And I think that identity could have been there with Brady Oliveira. Is Zach Collaros going to go and have, an unbelievable season and lead a team to the Grey Cup all by himself? No, but there's not really many quarterbacks that can do that or that have done that in CFL history. So I still think if you had those pieces back, namely Kenny Lawler, and you kept Jamarcus Hardrick there, it's easy to say in hindsight, obviously. But I think Kenny Lawler, we could all agree, was an easy one, that could have made a big difference. Perhaps Lawler would have suffered an injury, and I get it from that perspective, and perhaps Winnipeg would have had to go over the salary cap. But in a Grey Cup year, that's one of the moves that stands out most to me.
I'm just going to jump in and respond to that before I let Hodge say his piece, because I agree with you on a number of those points. Those key roster moves, not bringing Lawler back, losing Dalton Schoen, all of those are impactful. But in my opinion, what you've described there is not a $600,000 quarterback. If he can't overcome the fact that he doesn't have the number one receiver in the league anymore at his disposal, then that's not a guy that's pushing the needle enough. And perhaps if you had a $400,000 quarterback instead of a $600,000 quarterback, you're able to re-sign Kenny Lawler and bring him back, or get the weapons that Zach Collaros needs at this stage in his career. I don't want to knock anything that Zach has accomplished, because again, this is, in my opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer, two-time MOP, a guy who's done it and won Grey Cups. At this stage in his life and career, it's just not there anymore to do it on his own. And by demanding the price tag that he currently demands, it limits their ability to add the pieces that they need offensively to be the team that could have success with him as the quarterback.
I think that you could find a happy medium here, right? I think coming off two statistically middling at best type of seasons, you'd be well within your rights as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to say, hey, this could be your last year, Zach. We would love to have you back. We would love to have you mentor Taylor Elgersma, without whom, by the way, if Taylor's not in the pipeline, I think there are reasons for big concern in Winnipeg under center. For the reasons JC laid out, there's not a lot of guys available, right? Trey Ford is a reclamation project at this point. Taylor Powell, I think, could be a great CFL quarterback, but he already clearly seems to be the heir apparent in Hamilton. It might be tough to bring him in as a 2 for 2026. Cody Fajardo is a free agent, but he's made it pretty clear it's Edmonton or bust for him, basically. So it's not like there's 3 or 4 other proven commodities on the open market. McLeod Bethel-Thompson has played good football in this league in the past. He had one good game this year in Regina. Other than that, was far less than we've seen from him previously. So I think you can say, hey, we don't want to take, we don't completely pick your pocket here, but would you come back for 400? Like, Bo Levi Mitchell has now played 2 MOP caliber seasons, making in and around $350,000. So if he can do that for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, I see no reason why Zach Collaros shouldn't be willing to take less for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Now, Zach is obviously within his rights to say, screw you guys. I'm getting my butt kicked by defensive linemen taking shots. I'm not playing for a dime less. And if that's the case, then you got a decision to make. Are you going real young at quarterback and eating the money that is guaranteed for Zach in 2026? Or are you sucking it up and saying, okay, fine, here's the big old check. We're going to bring you back with the same dollar figure, and we'll see for 2027. I don't know. Those decisions are above my pay grade, but I think you're well within your right as the Blue Bombers to ask that. As for the rest of the team, because we've talked about the offense a lot.
Just hold on 1 second on Claros. I don't think his salary is the reason the Bombers had a down year. Right? I still think he's a high-level quarterback in this league, and if he became free, other teams would be interested in him. Like, it's not just one part here, and you can go over the salary cap if you want and pay the dollar-for-dollar luxury tax up to $99,999. So, like, let's not get it twisted here. I understand what you guys are saying, but I just don't want it to come off as, well, if Zach Collaros would have took $200,000 less, this Bombers team, would have been the Grey Cup. I think there's some other areas here, and namely, Michael Shea sort of alluded to this, that there's going to be change in professional football, but he doesn't necessarily like a lot of change. He likes the continuity. So we know Michael Shea is likely, or we have an idea, he's likely to ride with Zach Collaros as long as he would like to play. And I don't think it can be all laid at the feet of Zach Collaros. Like, you look at that game where the Riders played their backups, and Zach Collaros was running for his life.
Yeah.
Right. Let's not forget, he was with a first-year offensive coordinator in Jason Hogan, and I don't think we can underestimate that. And that, to me, I think is where we need to really drill down. There's multiple factors here. If Zach Collaros took a little bit less, could that have helped the Bombers? Possibly. But there's other injuries, first-year coordinator, Kenny Lawler not being back, even though he wanted to be back, according to him. There's other factors here. It's not just Zach Collaros.
There are. I mean, I think the point is more, it's easier to put a good team around somebody when they're making less. And that's just factually true. But I appreciate what you're saying. I don't think Zach Collaros is a bad player. If I thought he was a bad player, I would have no qualms about saying that on this show. But I think he's somebody who needs a few more tools, and I think he's somebody who needs a better system for 2026. And I think he can absolutely get this team back to a Grey Cup and even win it next year if he's provided those things. As for the rest of the club, I think Winnipeg special teams are actually in a great place. This team's special teams were not good at all in 2024. The return game was non-existent. Lucky Whitehead lost a fumble in the West Final and the Grey Cup. People don't talk about that, but it's true. And guess what? They go out and they find the guy who's likely to be named not only the most outstanding special teams player of the league, but also the most outstanding rookie in Trey Vavel.
Yes, that's right, JC. You heard that right, JC.
Jamison Sheehan had a good year punting the ball. Their cover units were not very good in 24.
Talk out here.
Yeah, well, hold on. JC can talk about awards later in the show.
Sorry.
I'm talking about Winnipeg special teams. Special teams don't get no love, and they should in the CFL. Jalen Smith, rookie out of North Texas, had a great year on teams. Ethan Ball out of Calgary had a great year on teams. Like, this team, special teams, way better this year than they were last year. And on defense, I mean, I think the East Semi exposed them a little bit. This was the number one team in the league in terms of offensive points allowed. Obviously, the explosions that happened earlier in the season needed to get fixed. They largely were, and then the East Semi, the Alouettes completely exposed them. So I actually don't see a ton of issues with Winnipeg's secondary. I think they need some help at field corner. But to me, the other issue is the pass rush. And if you go back and you watch the 45-yard bomb that Davis Alexander threw for a touchdown to Tyson Philpott early in that game, you got Jake Thomas at nose, who just kind of pushes the pile, which is fair. As part of a three-man rush, that's your job as the nose. And then James Vaughters and Jamal Adams, literally, it kind of looks like they try to run a stunt. Sorry, go ahead.
Jamal Adams isn't a player.
Sorry, Devin Adams. Jamal Woods. My apologies. Jamal Woods and Jamal Adams is a safety in the NFL, is he not?
Yes, he is.
Okay, my apologies. My brain combined the names. Jamal Woods.
Oh, you're going to piss off a bunch of CFL hardcores.
Yeah, I know. They look like they run a stunt, but they literally just kind of run into each other. So it's like, okay, so you've got a three-man rush that just became a one-man rush where two guys are just kind of standing there doing nothing. Like for that to happen in a playoff game is embarrassing. Now, I don't think Jamal Woods or James Vaughters are bad players, but if you're only going to rush three consistently in my opinion, you need 3 pretty exceptional guys. And so I think Willie Jefferson should be brought back. But is he a $200,000 player at this point of his career, just like Zach Collaros? I think the answer is I think he's worth having back, but probably not at that elite dollar figure. And they need to find other guys. And maybe it's Matt Jaworski, who I thought looked good in that regular season finale. Kydrell Jenkins, who I think prefers to go by KJ, also look good. So like they have some young guys in house. Maybe one of them is a thing for 2026. But to me, I think the defense that has been very, very heavily squared on the secondary as of late, right? Dropping 9, narrowing the windows. I think that can still be the identity, but I think it needs to be a little more balanced, because I think when you're not applying almost any pressure to opposing quarterbacks, they're going to hurt you. So that's where I think the Bombers can get better. I think they need to get better on the defensive line, and I think they need to add not 5 weapons on offense. I think they need to add 1, maybe 2 weapons on offense and get a little better along that offensive line. But this is not a team that needs to. If this team was a house, you're not ripping it to the studs to redo the whole thing. I think, the main floor bathroom needs some new tiles. I think you need to paint the rec room and maybe that carpet got some spring runoff on it last spring. Maybe we can redo the carpet in the basement bedroom. Other than that, like this is not a team that has collapsed. I just don't get that. Like they had a winning record. I know they finished 4th, but like there's a lot of teams in the CFL who'd have been delighted to go 10-8 this year. A lot of them.
Ottawa.
I wasn't going to name them,
Edmonton.
but I think we all know who they are, right?
Toronto.
Fans in Edmonton would run through the streets nude for 10-8 right now.
You're speaking for a lot of people there.
Well, hey, I'm speculating, but I'm just saying 10-8 would look really good to a lot of teams. So I don't blame
through
fans
the streets
again.
nude wouldn't look really good for a lot of teams.
I'm not blaming fans who are happy to see Winnipeg fall down, right? Everybody loves a winner, and then we love to see winners lose, right? As a society, I get it. At no point after the resurgence in that East Semi did I see Winnipeg really at any point this year and look and go, wow, this team is awful. Like there's room for improvement, but they're still a winning team at the end of the day.
I want to just emphasize one thing, okay? Football games are 60 minutes long, because I just don't understand. And I get we live in this social media age where it's all about right now, but people freaking out in that game where the Bombers get behind, like it's a slow start and they come back and took the lead in the 3rd quarter. Football games are 60 minutes. Before we jump to conclusions, let's let the game play out. And there's this like idea of garbage time and making it look close. Football games are 60 minutes. It's who is the best team over 60 minutes. So it just bothers me when people are like, oh, well, the Bombers look like their season's over and it's the end of an era and this and that. It's like, no, there's usually like an ebb and flow to a game. And to Hodge and JC's points, if the Bombers would have rolled over and lost 55-10 or something like that, then people would have serious questions. And I think another point that needs to be driven home is how great this era was for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I think it's going to be a little bit different going forward because there's going to be some change. But going to 5 straight Grey Cups, like that's almost unheard of. The Edmonton football team has their hand up. I get that. But it's unbelievable. Like, let's look at that for what it is and not get lost in the recency bias. I'm not saying you guys are, but I'm saying, people as a whole.
Well, and I'll add to that quickly. Like, it's only happened twice in CFL history previous to this that a team's gone to 5 in a row. When it happened those times, I'm not discrediting that by any stretch of the imagination. Not taking a single tiny bit or shred away from Edmonton. But like they did that when the CFL had like 35-man rosters and nobody changed teams in free agency and there was no salary cap. Like to do that now when the rules like rosters are bigger and free agency is huge and the rules are specifically designed to prevent teams from dominating year to year. Like specifically, they are designed to level the playing field and give everybody a chance every season, because ultimately that's what's in the best interest of the league. We don't want fan bases, right, to go years and years and years without playoffs, etc. is amazing, right? Like what the Bombers have done. And yeah, they lost 3 straight Grey Cups. The last loss was embarrassing. I'm not discrediting that. That was not a good performance last year in Vancouver. But like they won 2 and they came 1 play away from winning in 2022 and 2023. And then they whatted the bed in 2024. So like I'm not saying they're beyond reproach. I think they would understand the criticism, and Mike O'Shea said as much today. He understands critics saying, yeah, this team might be slipping. He gets it. But like having talked to a ton of the guys on the team since their loss in the semi, talking to Osh today, I don't get the sense that anybody is panicking or hand-wringing. This seems like a motivated team. They seem excited to get back. They seem sad the year is done. Like nothing here. Like I'm not seeing anybody passively being like, yeah, I'm done with this team. I'm so excited to go to free agency. I don't see any of that. Like this seems like a team that can't wait to get back for 2026 and try another run.
This is the same team that absolutely slapped the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who a lot of people are goo gaga about. And Bo Levi Mitchell, rightfully so, back-to-back seasons throwing for over 5,000 yards. And, it's part of football. You're going to have some of those burn the tape game. But, like, let's not forget this. I'm not saying Winnipeg's going to be great next year and get back to the Grey Cup. I just think this narrative that seems to be out there is that this team's about to fall off a cliff. As long as Michael Shea is a head coach with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, this team is going to be competitive. I get, and Hodge, to your credit, that he could potentially be a free agent. But based on his comments, it does not seem like he's about ready to pull up the roots that he's put down there for 12 years, 11 seasons, and leave. So the Bombers, whether people want to hate him or not, are going to be a competitive football team in 2026 with
and I'm offering
Zach Collaros at quarterback.
Well, and I'm offering my opinion on this, but I'll just echo this quickly. Going into the playoffs, I polled a ton of people I trust. Hey, who do you think's going to win these games? And a lot of people picked Montreal, as I did, by the way, and JC did on our weekly picks. I picked the Alouettes to win, but I thought it was going to be really close. And basically everybody I polled unanimously either picked the Bombers, that was a minority, but everybody who didn't pick them said like, but I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs. Like this team has been there. They've done that. But like the point is nobody even anonymously was like, yeah. And when you watch the film, they're awful at this, or when you oh man, they're terrible at this, or wow, they're going to get embarrassed in Montreal. Like I've yet to talk to somebody who makes their living in some way, shape or form in the Canadian Football League as a player, coach, personnel person, whatever, who's been like, wow, this era is over. This team is toast. Like people, like they have, the point I'm making is they have mutual respect around the league. And I think that says a lot.
I think that's a valid point. And this is the last thing I will say on this topic because we do need to move on. But I don't think I was claiming, or even a lot of people who are claiming the Bombers are in decline, are saying that they're going to go out next year and not win a single game and finish last in the CFL. To me, that's not what an end of an era means. I think that their reign as the undisputed top of the West Division team has undeniably ended. And they might be a playoff team next year. They might not be. They might be second. They might be third. They might even get back to the top. But I think this moment is a watershed, a separation potentially between what came before and what will come after. And I think what comes after will have to be, even if it's under the same head coach and general manager, a different era, as in that team is going to be shaped differently. To me, in football, where teams reload every year, that's what that means. The Calgary Stampeders' tremendous turnaround season stalled out in the West semifinal as the Stamps lost by a walk-off field goal against the BC Lions. Despite making several major internal changes to address problems raised by players last season, Dave Dickinson's team still has not won a playoff game since 2018. Have the Stampeders laid a strong enough foundation to change that in 2026? Or are there still structural flaws to be addressed?
I believe there's a chance that the Stampeders have laid a strong enough foundation to win a playoff game in 2026. And let's give credit where it's due for Calgary, because a lot of people, us included, were very critical of Dave Dickinson and the Stampeders and the way that the team had been declining. but he was able to make some key changes and get this team back into the playoffs with a winning record in 2025. So that is well deserved. I know there's a handful at least of people out there in the Stampeders organization that were not necessarily too happy with some of our coverage during Grey Cup week last year, but let's just put that on the table here for a minute, because we're just following what we're told. Okay, JC, you were told by a number of former Stampeders their honest opinion about the organization. Same thing happened to me post-game with Kadeem Carey, who out of nowhere pointed the finger at Dave Dickinson. I believe we covered it fairly, gave the Stampeders the opportunity to have their say. Dave Dickinson took the high road, which I totally understand. I have a lot of respect for Dave Dickinson as a coach, a GM, a quarterback in this league, a Hall of Famer at everything that he's done. And as an aside, as a person, he's always treated me very well. But I do understand there's some Stampeders people that feel some type of way about our coverage. So it needs to be reiterated that this team had a big-time turnaround season in a key year for Dave Dickinson in terms of his future with this organization. You would imagine that this is going to allow him to continue as the head coach and general manager there. And, by and large part, outside the injuries with this football team, if they can get even a number, not all, but a number of their key pending free agents re-signed, with Bob Slowick as defensive coordinator and what they had going on offense with Dedrick Mills and the weapons there, this is a really intriguing team going into 2026. And JC, you saw it live. Calgary outplayed BC in that football game. And I think the Stamps were unlucky to lose it.
I don't think unlucky is an appropriate reaction. I thought that they lost because of stupid mistakes that they made at the end of the first and second halves. And unfortunately for them, it ruined what was otherwise a great playoff performance, like a really good performance. And I want to take my hat off to the Stamps for their improvement, going from 5 wins to 11, even in the CFL, where, it's not like hockey. You can rebuild a CFL team pretty quickly. That's still a rare thing. That's very impressive. And the Stamps absolutely deserve credit for doing that. But in the first half, to allow the clock to expire without kicking a field goal, brutal. Like that's a bad regular season mistake. That's an unforgivable playoff mistake, especially when you've got timeouts in your pocket. But then at the end of the game, to be snapping the ball, like the goal for that field goal at the end of regulation should have been, let's kick this with zeros on the clock. If you want to take a shot to the end zone, that's fine. But we need to ensure that the last play of regulation is our Hall of Fame kicker putting it through the uprights to send the game to overtime. Because if we give Nathan Rourke, who is the best player in the CFL, I'm going to say that again, the best player in the CFL, any amount of time, we run the risk of him ruining our season. And I think they snapped the ball in that second down 6 seconds into the play clock. Like they could have run another 14 seconds off that sucker. And then VA threw it up in the end zone to nobody. It's like, what are we doing? Like the details matter. And again, it sucks for Calgary because I want to give them a ton of credit. Their defense was sensational in that West semi. They made Nathan Rourke look average at best. Offensively, they moved the ball really well against a very stout BC Lions defense. And without two of their top 3 offensive tackles, I thought they did a relatively nice job of protecting VA. Like those are big concerns I had going into that game for the Stampeders. They overcame that. They did a great job. And they've got all these great young players, Sheldon Arnold and Jalen Hutchings. And Anthony Johnson, who's done some really great things on the back. Jacob Roberts, who's been great for them as a linebacker. Like their young defense is flying around. And so to make those mistakes, obviously there were huge special teams problems in that game. They gave up a return score. They had the fumble. But this to me is a perfect example of how you can win 2 phases and lose, right? We typically think if you win 2 or 3 phases, you win the game. Well, this game proves not. You can win offense, you can win on defense, but if you get crushed on special teams and you make some really foolish game management errors at key points, you can lose. And that is why the Calgary Stampeders aren't getting to the West Final, despite the fact that, again, I think they outplayed the BC Lions as a whole in Vancouver on Saturday.
I think you summarized that beautifully, Hodge. That's exactly how that game played out. And the Stampeders have nobody to blame but themselves for those errors. And I'm sure they're going to spend the entire offseason looking in the mirror and evaluating those decisions, because they were clearly the wrong ones and they cost them that football game, despite everything else that was going right for them in that game. But if we zoom out and look at it as a whole, I am bullish on this Stampeders team going forward because of the youth that they have and the level of excitement that those players have brought to the table. You look at, that secondary, multiple rookies, both halfbacks, a cornerback, guys making plays, Jacob Roberts at linebacker. You've got, that defensive line, Jalen Hutchings and Clarence Hicks. Now, some of those guys are pending free agents. Others may have NFL opportunities. But even if you bring back a handful of those pieces and add a few more, you've got a really good foundation. And over on offense, Dedrick Mills appears that he wants to come back. I think you have two really strong, foundational, young Canadian offensive linemen, which I think a number of teams across the league would absolutely kill to have, in Christy Nakanu and Christopher Fortin, two high draft picks that have instantly panned out at a position where typically it takes some time and some seasoning to play at a high level. These guys are doing it essentially right out of the box, and I think that bodes really well for the future. And some really exciting Canadian receivers. Clark Barnes is a pending free agent, but even if he's not back, you've got Damien Alford who can step right in, and we saw the explosive flashes from him as a rookie. They've drafted really well. They've started to find American talent again, and I think that bodes tremendously well for the future. And they fixed the culture, which was a problem last year. There was people in that locker room talking about a division between older and younger players. That's not happening anymore. The food's better. The weight room's better. The turf's improved. Ownership appears more engaged. I'm sure some of those things would have happened regardless, but, if the Stampeders want to send us a thank you card for all our Grey Cup media coverage of all their problems, they're more than welcome to. I'll accept gift cards or cash. If it's a gift card, preferably to a wonderful restaurant of your choosing, right? You fix those problems and you look like a better football team. And I think you've set the stage to get back to an era, maybe not an era of dominance, but certainly an era of year after year contention, which frankly was not the case in those last few years of decline before they finally broke that playoff streak. I think this is a harbinger of good things to come.
One thing I didn't like, Vernon Adams Jr. in his response to Donna Spencer, who was simply asking a question at the Stamps' end-of-season media availabilities about the plays that he would like back in the West semifinal, the way that he looked at her and responded. She's asking a valid question. You're a professional football player who earns over $400,000 for a living, and you can't take us inside your mind when you made some key mistakes in terms of time management, namely the one at the end of the first half, letting the clock expire and leaving a critical 3 points on the field. I just have had enough of it, fellas. We've talked about it on the podcast multiple times. If you are in the Canadian Football League as a player, head coach, general manager, what have you, you are a professional. You are getting paid to do your job. So when it does not go well or you fail in this instance, and the Stampeders had a great season, I just can't understand why some people cannot deal with valid and fair questions from the media. I understand there's going to be emotions, and I'll allow for a lot of that. But I just thought that was disrespectful to a longtime Canadian veteran journalist in terms of the response and the demeanor to a basic question. And one question that a lot of Stampeders fans would like answers to be quite honest. I don't think people understand sometimes that when the questions get asked, you're not necessarily talking to that person. whether you like them or not. You are talking to your fan base. So I had thought that Vernon Adams Jr. had come a long way in his maturity process. But that one instance shows me that perhaps it's not as far as I would have thought.
I don't disagree with you, Dunk, and I think the mask certainly dropped for VA in that moment. But I do think if we're going to discuss this, it's worth noting that after the game at the podium, I thought VA did give an illuminative response on his thought process on that play when I asked him about it. And to be entirely transparent, as longtime listeners of this podcast know, my relationship with VA during his time in BC was at some points rocky. He wasn't always giving me answers when I was asking questions, but I think he evolved towards the end. And he essentially said that the throw to Tevin Jones that was sort of bobbled and caught, he wasn't actually trying to complete that throw. He was trying to throw it away, but it got too close to the receiver. The receiver tried to catch it. Is that a bit of a cop-out answer? Should he have scrambled at all? Yes and no to those respective questions. But he did at least take us through that play and admit that he made a mistake by holding onto the ball for as long as he did. Now, he wasn't as forthcoming the following day in the locker room for whatever reason, but at the podium, when the emotion should be the highest, he did give what I thought was a thorough response.
That's fair. I just wanted to balance it out, and that's a valid point, JC, because I watched that too. And I'm not saying he has to even answer it. You can give a non-answer in a respectful way. That's just what stood out the most to me with Donna Spencer. And I can understand there's emotions and your season is over and all that kind of stuff, but in that media availability, it was largely professional, I felt like, overall. And there's that one instance that sticks out seemingly out of nowhere.
And I respect the fact that emotions run really high after these losses, right? All of these guys think they're going to win, right? They all in their mind have envisioned all year going to that Grey Cup in Winnipeg and what it's going to feel like to win it. And so it can be shocking and obviously very disappointing. But also, like, VA is a 10-year vet. So, like, you should know going into this game, like, you're going to have to answer for the good, you're going to have to answer for the bad. And every player in the history of professional football has had at least one good play over the course of a game and at least one bad play. So, like, you're not going to go 100%. I don't think it's possible. If someone has played a perfect game of football, let me know. I want to watch that tape and see what it looks like, but I don't think it's happened. So, like, yeah, there's going to be positive, there's going to be negative, and it's your job to answer for it. And the good news is you're going to have to talk about it for a couple minutes after the game. You have to talk about it a couple minutes on garbage bag day, and then you have to talk to anybody for 6 months. So, like, bite the bullet, be a pro, and do it. It's I don't think it's that hard. Like, I don't think I'm not saying it's easy, but like, people do way harder things every day. It's not rocket surgery, right? Like, you can do it. Just
what is rocket surgery?
It was a joke. It was a joke. And if you want, by the way, the Calgary Stampeders free agent list, we got it up at 3DownNation.com. So check that out.
I just think, let me reiterate this. Vernon Adams Jr. had a really good season with Calgary. First year, new offense. I just want that to be out there to be as balanced as hopefully possibly we can.
And a really good playoff game other than that decision, I would say. I mean, he was sensational at times.
He was the best quarterback this weekend. Period. Like Davis Alexander was too, but Davis had the ugly pick along the sideline. Nathan Rourke could not get much going. And Zach Collaros, I mean, the pick, I don't really blame him for it. You're down 2 scores with 19 seconds left. You just kind of have to force the ball there. But yeah, VA was the best quarterback of the 4, in my opinion. And I think, so the stats make that objectively true. Obviously, stats don't tell the full story. But I would imagine that the tape backs that up as well. Live, that's what it looked like. The BC Lions and Montreal Alouettes both survived scares in their respective home semifinal playoff games, and they will now head on the road to face Saskatchewan and Hamilton in the West and East finals, respectively. Which team do you have more confidence in pulling an upset to reach the Grey Cup?
I think you have to say the Montreal Alouettes here. And to be frank, is it going to be an upset against the Hamilton Tiger Cats? Because I think there's a chance that they might be slight favorites in this game. I'm not in Vegas setting the odds, but they've certainly been white hot to end the season with Davis Alexander healthy. Yes, they let their foot off the gas a little bit in the third quarter and let Winnipeg back into that football game, but you see the explosiveness of that offense and what they are capable of accomplishing when firing on all cylinders. I think the Alouettes are going to put on a really good show against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. On the flip side, the BC Lions, I think there's some cause for concern, right? That Calgary game, as we already laid out, they were not the better team, even though they won. And I think they struggled against that Calgary defense offensively. I don't think it was a bad game necessarily from Nathan Rourke. Like, he didn't make a bunch of mistakes or miss a bunch of open throws. But I think the game plan leaned too much on being conservative and trying to establish the run when it wasn't there. They haven't been able to generate any push in the run game the last 2 weeks. And they went 2 and out far too frequently. And really, we didn't get a chance to see Rourke shine and open it up until that final game-winning drive. I think the lack of a run game and some of the problems that the offensive line has dealt with the last little bit are cause for concern. I think it's also concerning that they very nearly lost and probably should have lost that regular season finale when Saskatchewan was playing a lot of their backups. And when the starters were on the field in that game, BC had no answers for them. They have a strong defensive line, the Riders do, and we saw what interior pressure, like what Jalen Hutchings and Miles Brown were able to put on Nathan Rourke, can do to that vaunted offense. We've seen what happens when they aren't able to get James Butler and Xander Horvath going, which they weren't able to do in that regular season finale against Saskatchewan. So I think this is a bad matchup for them in a hostile environment in Saskatchewan. That makes me far more worried about the BC Lions prospects than it does the Montreal Alouettes.
JC, you are correct. The Alouettes have opened, and we're taping this on Monday afternoon, as 2.5-point favorites on the road
there
at
we
Hamilton
go.
Stadium against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I'm sure the Ticats will use that in some form or fashion as motivation. And for reference, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are 3.5-point favorites at home at Mosaic Stadium for the West Final against the BC Lions. The easy pick here is the Montreal Alouettes for a number of reasons, but as Hodge has already said 2 times on this podcast, Nathan Rourke is the best football player in the Canadian Football League. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders better be careful about what they wished for here, because there was this thought around Saskatchewan that the easier team to beat would be the BC Lions, considering the Riders' record against BC and the fact that Saskatchewan had gone 0-2 against the Calgary Stampeders, even though it was much earlier in the season. And then also the fact, as you alluded to, JC, that the Riders almost beat the Lions playing their backups for a decent part of that football game. But you mentioned it as well, JC, that the BC Lions didn't necessarily play well and probably weren't the better team in the West semifinal, but still won. Like, to me, that makes them even more dangerous, that they know they didn't play well and they still got to win. They have a chance to fix what did not go well and perhaps get to a Grey Cup. So I'm going to say that my pick for this question is the Alouettes, undoubtedly, with the way that Noel Thorpe has that defense flying around, with the way that Davis Alexander has this charisma that just oozes out of him and gets infused into the rest of his teammates. The fact that he is 12-0 as a starter now, including the regular season and postseason, is unbelievable. Like, this guy is potentially about to explode. If he gets the Grey Cup, he's going to be, I think, great for the Canadian Football League. That's not necessarily why I think the Alouettes can win in Hamilton, but let's not forget that this Tiger Cats team, I know they got whooped by the Bombers, and we talked about it earlier, but they're a force to be reckoned with on offense, and Brent Monson has had that defense improving throughout the season. As for the Riders and Lions game, let's just not forget that Nathan Rourke is capable of winning football games on his own. Corey Mason, that defense has largely gotten the best of him. And I do worry that from the Lions' perspective, Trevor Harris was able to go up and down the field in 3 drives in that final regular season game that essentially meant nothing to the Riders. I believe it was touchdown, field goal, touchdown, and made it look very easy. Nothing's going to be easy in the postseason, but for this question, I'll side with the Owls.
Weather forecast for the West Final is high of -1 with feeling as low as -8, which I do think helps the Rough Riders at least a little bit. I don't think that BC is poorly suited to playing in cold weather conditions. I think that's something Buck Pierce has done a smart job of, is becoming more run game focused. Obviously, James Butler's very good, but Xander Horvath has been very good as well as a bigger bodied back who can move the pile. That said, BC's offensive line, I thought, was not very good at all in that West semifinal. And that starts on the interior with Michael Couture, a guy who Buck Pierce had in Winnipeg at center and is now, of course, in BC, has been for a few years. George Una, a more of a pass blocking guard, right, who's in his first year as a starter, former first round pick out of Windsor. They've got to be better. And Dejon Allen, you'd certainly hope for BC's sake that they are going to be able to get him in the lineup, because he was not in that starting lineup due to injury, and they sorely missed him. So I think I'm going to pick the Riders to win the West Final. I haven't made up my mind yet. I could pick the BC Lions. And by the way, we're not supposed to tip our votes for who we voted for MOP. So I'm not going to do that. But I am going to tell you I did not vote for Bo Levi Mitchell. So I'm not going to tell you who I voted for, but I didn't vote for Bo. The answer to this question, with all due respect to the Ticats, who are a worthy first round bye team, a worthy first place team, is the Montreal Alouettes. And I'll give credit to Derek Taylor, my colleague in Winnipeg, who's, of course, the voice of the Bombers on 680 CJOB. He ran the numbers for the point differential for the Alouettes when Davis Alexander's on the field. And what he found is if you compare the point differential that the Alouettes had with Davis Alexander on the field, and you extrapolate that over the course of a full season, it correlates to what would be a 15-3 team. So I'm not saying the Alouettes are a 15-3 team, but what I am saying is the numbers bear out that when Davis Alexander is on the field, they outscore other teams at a rate consistent with previous teams that have gone 15-3, which is pretty darn impressive. And obviously nobody in the CFL this year even got close to 15-3. Saskatchewan and Hamilton won their respective divisions at 12-6. And one thing that I will add is there are some people around the league who've kind of pointed to the fact that I'm not going to call them soft wins, but if you look at some of the wins that the Hamilton Tiger Cats had, I mean, like, they beat the Alouettes when James Morgan started. They beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers when Chris Streveler started. Like, some of their wins, like they beat the Red Blacks at the end of the year when Tyree Adams started. Like, they have some backup victories. They beat McLeod Bethel Thompson in week 4 for their first win of the season. So obviously those wins still count for 2 points, just like any win does. But it wouldn't surprise me at all come game day if the Alouettes were still favored to win this. Do the Ticats have a path to victory? Absolutely, they do. It's easier to win coming off the bye. Bo Levi Mitchell has played at an MOP level. They've got the healthiest roster in the CFL. They've got great weapons down the field. Their offensive line, I think, has been the best over the course of the year. Defensively, they forced more takeaways than anybody. Like, there's a lot to really like here. Isaiah Wooden has been fantastic when healthy in the return game. Like, there's a lot to like about the Hamilton Tiger Cats. But over the course of this season, when Davis Alexander's been in the lineup, I think that the Alouettes have been the best team in the league, and I think that the numbers back that up. So I will likely be taking not just the Alouettes as the team more likely to get the upset. I think I'm going to be picking them to win the East Final, but I want a few more days to think about it, and I want to see some injury reports before I make that definitive call.
Yeah,
to continue the numbers. Go ahead, JC.
Go ahead, Dunk. No, I'll cap it. You go first.
Okay, I was just going to say, to continue the numbers on Davis Alexander in the regular season, 7-0, that's well documented. 34 points per game, 392 net yards per game, plus 18 in the turnover differential. That's with him. Without him, 3-8, 18.8 points per game, 289.5 yards per game. So that's less than 100 yards per game. And the turnover differential was -10. That's an insane difference. Like, that's wild to me. Plus 18 when they had him to -10. Now, that's not all Davis Alexander, but I think that's what he means to this team as a player and also a leader. I'll be curious to see if he engages in any trash talk with the Hamilton Tiger Cats because he fired back at Willie Jefferson and then backed it up, and it was awesome. So I'm all for it. Davis Alexander, you want to spit some trash talk, man? Let's hear it.
Yeah, what I'll say is I agree with Hodge. Nathan Rourke is the best player in the CFL, and you can infer from that statement who I voted for MOP. I think you can make a compelling argument. Now, his statistics don't merit MOP or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But you can make a compelling argument that the second best player in the CFL right now is Davis Alexander. And I think he's going to be a guy who, if he stays healthy next year, is going to be very seriously in that MOP conversation and will be in it with Nathan Rourke for years to come as a couple of young quarterbacks ripping it up in this league.
I'll quickly throw in one thing here. We know that general manager Danny Machocha, who just signed an extension for himself, loves to sign guys early, right? And if I'm the Montreal Alouettes, and this is an if scenario, but if the Montreal Alouettes do in fact win the East Final, go to the Grey Cup, and especially if they win that Grey Cup, you can't let Davis Alexander go into a contract year in 2026. You got to pay the man now. Like we just talked about that $600,000 figure for Zach Collaros. To me, that is what, if I'm Davis Alexander, I want on my new deal to stick with the Alouettes. I know he loves being in Montreal, so I'm not suggesting that he needs, to be coerced to stay. But I'm just saying, if I'm the Alouettes, there's a 0% chance I let him get just 1 year away from free agency. You got to re-up him.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders in the city of Regina have been named as the hosts for the 2027 Grey Cup, which will mark the 4th straight year that the game is played out west. Additionally, the game will be played on November 7th, making it the earliest Grey Cup game ever. A CFL spokesperson confirmed to 3DownNation that the league season will be moved up by a week as a result. Is that a smart move, John?
Definitely. Randy Ambrosi told us in the past that the CFL games that are played in the summer drive more revenue than the games that are played in the fall as the weather turns and gets a little colder. So this is easy. This is one of the tap-in putts that I've talked about that the league needs to start making repeatedly if they're going to really become a revenue generator and help those franchise values grow. So this is very smart. I'm curious to see exactly how that schedule is laid out when it starts. I think will be a key. I've already had some people, JC was talking about this, and Hodge, I'm sure you were too, talk about, what's going to go on with the CFL draft. I'm sure they'll figure that out if they have to draft blind. This is about moving forward and driving more revenue. So I think you can figure out the other parts of this along the way. Stuart Johnston and his staff probably have, and I'm just curious to see how it's all laid out.
Quick note, I just checked my notes. Davis Alexander is under contract through 2027 already, so I retract some of what I said. That being said, I don't even want Davis Alexander 2 years away from free agency. I want to re-sign him through 2028 because he's a budding star. He really is. And I agree with JC. If he stays healthy in 2026, he's going to be the East Division's nominee for MOP. As for Grey Cup, Regina Grey Cups are great if the Riders are in the game. 2022.
Talk about the season moving up, bro.
I'm talking about hosting the Grey Cup. I was disappointed in 2022 when the stadium was maybe, I would venture to say 60% full. I appreciate that Andrew Harris against the Blue Bombers was probably the worst matchup in the eyes of most Rider fans that it possibly could have been. And I also appreciate that the weather wasn't great. But it's a beautiful stadium in Regina. And though the first 3 quarters of that game were nothing to write home about. The fourth quarter was incredible, and it would have been nice if the stadium was packed. I wrote about this. I talked about it a little bit this year. It's entirely possible that this year's Grey Cup matchup in Winnipeg will be the Riders against the team that knocked the Bombers out of the playoffs, which is probably a nightmare for most Bombers fans. But still, I'm hoping that Princess Auto Stadium is packed, because when it's packed, it's the best atmosphere in the league. We'll obviously have to wait and see for November 16th if that's the case. But I just hope that come this time around in Regina, we get a better halftime show. I hope that the stadium is full, because the festival in Regina was great. I just hope that the game itself is full. As for moving up the season, I think this is smart. The CFL needs to make more hay when the weather's good. Yes, it's true that in the springtime, the weather is not always great on the prairies. But if the choice is having a part of training camp indoors, right? Like, it's a bit of an added cost, I think, for some teams who don't necessarily have a free option to practice indoors. But guess what? We have to have a lot of practices indoors in this country now during the summertime because of smoke, right? Because of, or because of extreme heat, right? So like, I don't think it's a huge issue to say, well, let's just go inside if, it's freezing in April in Winnipeg or Regina or Edmonton or any of the places where that's a major concern. Teams already have to go inside. So it's not necessarily an added expense if you have to do it later in the year anyway. And people do not want to sit in the cold, right? We've seen that just in the last couple of weeks with half full stadiums. Now, the East semifinal is our guy, Pablo Herrera Vergara, said that game in Montreal was affected by a local transit strike, right? There's not really any parking on site by Percival Molson Stadium. So, that's just the reality. If there's no transit, it's going to be tough. But if the choice is being in the warm and watching football on your 70-inch television or sitting out in the cold, people will choose the former, even if they have a ticket to the game a lot of the time. So I think anything that you can do to move training camp to colder weather if you have to, or preseason games, right? Preseason games are generally not super well attended, even for people with season tickets, right? If you can hit the start of the regular season on May long weekend, or dare I say even a week or two earlier, I think that's great. And what that does too is it just pushes Labor Day and those classic matchups a little bit later on in the season when they matter even more. And we get warmer weather playoff games. So I like moving the season up. I do have some concerns about the draft, and you're going to talk about that, JC. But honestly, I think one of the challenges with the draft right now is it's so late relative to the start of the season, right? I think one of the things that could really help the CFL is the return of like full-fledged OTAs or rookie camps that happen, 4, 6, 8 weeks in front of the season. And if you move the draft way up, like let's say the draft is the first week of March, theoretically, a lot of the guys who get drafted who know they're not going to the NFL could even sign and attend camps in late March if that's when they are. And then you come back in, the end of April for training camp. And instead of, especially the U Sports guys who just because they have less coaching, right, and have played fewer collegiate games are usually a little bit behind the NCAA guys. Maybe now they're not fighting for their lives at the start of camp because it's like, well, I got drafted 6 days ago and now I'm in a CFL training camp, right? Like sometimes the turnaround is that tight. Maybe we could stretch that out and set guys up for more success. I know drafting blind is not optimal. And for the uninitiated, what the concern is like, okay, I draft Devin Veresak out of Windsor, second overall, expecting him to be my starting middle linebacker. But all of a sudden, oh no, the New England Patriots have signed him to a UDFA deal down south. And now this kid who I drafted, I'm super excited about, we might never see, right? That's not optimal. That's happened before in the CFL, but it also happens under the current system, right? Where you draft a guy and then he gets signed, right? As maybe a surprise. So I like moving it up. Honestly, I think you can make an argument that in today's day and age, we should be playing Grey Cup before Halloween. It would not bother me. There would be part of me that would miss the romance of November, right? But like, does anybody like being out in the cold? I'm speaking as a Winnipegger, for goodness sakes. Does anybody like it? The answer, by and large, is no. We want to play when the weather is nice. So I like moving it up.
I don't disagree with any of the points that you guys have raised about the benefits of moving it up. I do think there needs to be some careful thought about some of the elements around it here, right, with the draft. For the uninitiated, as you laid out, like the current setup is that the NFL draft takes place in the last weekend in April. In 2027, for example, the last weekend in April will also be the first weekend in May. So the draft will likely, the dates haven't been announced, but based on the trend that they've followed throughout the last decade or so, the draft will end on May 1st, and guys would sign UDFA contracts after that point. Presumably, with this setup, CFL training camps would have already started by that point. So anybody who wants to sign a UDFA contract or go to a rookie minicamp as an invitee and try and make their hay in the NFL and get that opportunity would not be able to go to rookie camps and would miss a larger portion of the start of training camp than they do under the current system. Do guys miss now? Absolutely. Are there rare instances where guys sign contracts after you've drafted them? Yes, that also occurs. We've seen that happen with Taylor Elgersma just this past year, but it's pretty rare, and it happens only once every handful of years. Typically, you have an idea of the lay of the land. The guys who have minicamp tryouts are miss rookie camp and are there for the start of training camp, and it runs pretty smoothly in that direction. This would essentially make you draft without knowledge of what circumstance these guys are going into in the NFL. And it would also eliminate the possibility of some of the Americans who may have gone through that mini camp circuit or be looking for UDFA offers, potentially signing earlier and going through a full training camp in the CFL. Now, that's a lesser concern in my mind because very few Americans come direct without a year in the NFL to the CFL. They typically take their time regardless, but it is something that has to be considered. You're going to have less of the guys you want in training camp under this proposed change just because of the timing with the NFL. I think the other thing that needs to be considered, and is only topical now, is what if the Blue Jays make another World Series run? Because we saw how immensely popular that was this season and how that very much affected the attendance, and I presume also will have affected the viewership of the semifinal games. And yes, that might be a once in a generation type of problem. They're not going to make the World Series every single year. But in this setup, a World Series Game 7 would probably go at the same time as your East or West final, right? And if you move up the Grey Cup by another week, if you want to play it on Halloween, like Hodge has suggested, well, what if the World Series Game 7 coincides with the Grey Cup? I think that's something that should be not at the front of your mind, because again, it's an improbable possibility, but something that has to be at the back of your mind, knowing you're probably not going to win that television matchup if that unlikely circumstance was to occur. I think you're in the sweet spot with November 7th.
The Canadian Football League has indefinitely suspended defensive lineman Shawn Oakman for violating the league's gender-based violence and harassment policy, leading to his release by the Montreal Alouettes on Friday night. What can you tell us about the situation?
Well, I mean, it's alleged by the league through a third-party investigation they had succinctly done that Oakman and a romantic partner of some kind filmed some type of illicit content that he then threatened to share with the child of that partner, who is a minor. And nothing has been proven in court. This is the CFL's findings from their investigation. These are just allegations, but obviously those allegations are deeply disturbing. So I think the CFL and the Montreal Alouettes deserve credit for dealing with this immediately. And obviously not having Shawn Oakman, who's an excellent player in the lineup, hurt the Alouettes, particularly with Mustafa Johnson also not being available due to injury for that playoff game. But in situations like this, I think everybody is entitled to proper order of operations, so to speak, right? Proper course of action. But I think it's good that they got it right, and they conducted the investigation, which included interviews with Oakman and the partner in question, and at the end of the day, those types of allegations obviously need to be taken seriously, and I think it's good that they were in this instance.
Yeah, it's deeply disturbing, and of course, your thoughts and our concerns immediately go to the alleged victims in this case. Once again, an example of a situation which, who knows if there will be a criminal element or any charges laid. I don't know the ins and outs of the law in that aspect, or what has been brought to police, what hasn't been. But the CFL has the power, even when there is not a criminal case laid or anything in a criminal nature, to make these decisions. And I think they wielded that power appropriately and with good due diligence in this case. What I appreciated about it, as opposed to some of the previous instances when we've seen guys quietly released and then blackballed from the CFL, is they were clear as to what the allegations were, what investigation did take place, and what the result would be, right? We haven't gotten those details in the past, and I still think there's more transparency needed in the future. I don't think this is something that should just be a press release. I think the commissioner needs to ask questions and answer questions regarding something of this nature, but it was more detailed and more transparent than it's been in the past. And I think that is a important step in the right direction, and perhaps something that they have learned from the Chad Kelly situation that we went through in 2024. So good on the league for making those steps. From an Alouettes perspective, I think they've got the bodies in the building to compensate for some of those losses, but with Lawal Uguak banged up, with Stafford Johnson banged up, and no Shawn Oakman, I think that defensive line, if you're going to look at one area that is of a concern for them, it would be that front right now. It's now time for JC's random neg lister, and I'm glad, Hodge, that in our topic on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, you mentioned that they need to find some pieces on that defensive line, because that's exactly where my mind went this week for my random neg lister. I'm going to highlight Texas Tech defensive lineman Miles Cole, who was just added to the Bombers neg list on November 1st because he was released from the Cincinnati Bengals practice roster on October 30th. So this is a guy who was just fresh on the street, and clearly the Bombers are eyeing for next season. He was a 7th-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2024, dressed for 8 games as a rookie, didn't do a whole lot, was released in training camp, and signed with Cincinnati. Not an overly productive guy in college either. 12.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks in 59 games, split between Louisiana Monroe and Texas Tech. But the reason I'm highlighting Miles Cole and the reason the Bombers are interested in him is because he has raw potential that you see in flashes that nobody else has because of his frame. Let me give you this guy's measurements. 6'6", 278 pounds. He runs a 4.67 at that size with a 10-foot broad jump. And, oh, by the way, you want to talk about length? He has 36 7/8 inch arms. That is absurd. I'm not sure there's a player in the CFL with arms within an inch of how long Miles Cole's arms are. This guy is a physical freak. Now, it hasn't been put all together on the football field yet, and that's why the NFL appears to have moved on from him. But he's still just 25 years old. That's old for NFL prospects that are raw. It's not old for raw CFL prospects. I think if the Bombers get their hands on somebody with those measurables, there's the potential for them to develop him into something that could be very disruptive. You think of Willie Jefferson and what his length has been able to do. Well, this guy is longer and heavier than Willie J is.
Yeah, Miles Cole can tie his shoes standing up. I mean, that is That is crazy length. He can scratch your back in Manitoba from Bismarck, North Dakota. Like, that is how long this guy is. That is wild. So, I'm hoping we see him in Winnipeg. That'd be fun. So time for Hodge's Heritage Moment. On this day in 2012, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defeated the Montreal Alouettes 19-11 in the final CFL game ever played at Canadian Stadium. Originally dubbed Winnipeg Stadium, the building had served as a home for the Blue Bombers since 1953, hosting 3 Grey Cups. The venue was initially set to close following the 2011 season, but remained open for 2012 due to delays in the construction of its replacement, Investors Group Field, now called Princess Auto Stadium. The city of Winnipeg began the demolition of the venue in April 2013, and the land was supposed to be redeveloped into retail space. It's actually mostly a parking lot and then an empty lot. So that part of it never has come to fruition, it seems. But regardless, I will say this, boys. This was my childhood stadium. I grew up going to the stadium, and it was old and lousy, even by the time I was a little kid. And I remember being so frustrated with the horrible amenities at this building. The seats were way too small. My knees did not fit. The bathrooms never had hot water to wash your hands in the wintertime. You couldn't see anything from the concourse to get food or whatever. Like the place was a dump. And I remember people telling me, just wait, one day you're going to miss this old place. And I always said, no, I'm never going to miss it. I would love to be the first one to throw a stick of dynamite at it, to be quite frank. And I must say, all these years later, I do miss old Canadian Stadium. It was a dump, but it was my childhood dump, and I miss it. I wish I could revisit it one last time.
Better or worse than McMahon?
I've never really spent time at McMahon. Like, I've been near McMahon, but I've never toured McMahon, so I can't judge it. I do think having and I'm obviously coming for Grey Cup next year, so I'll be righting that wrong soon. It's the only venue I've never been to in the CFL, for a CFL game. But they are very similar when you look at the kind of old school grandstand style. So I'd imagine they have a lot of the same shortcomings, but regardless, I do miss old Canadiens. There's only one Canadiens, and we'll miss it.
For my Canadian quarterback feature this week, I'm going to Arnaud Desjardins because he had a big game in the playoffs for the Laval Rouge et Or. 22 of 28, 356 yards, and count them, 4 touchdowns. This guy was a prospect in the 2025 CFL draft, went through unselected, but he's still a dude. I talked to some people in the CFL that believe this as well, personnel evaluators, that I think should get a legitimate opportunity in the Canadian Football League and might have some upside if he got one. But nonetheless, he's still at Laval doing his thing, leading them into a Jacques Dussault Cup showdown against the Montreal Carabins. Let's go to the 3-minute drill. The 4 conference championship matchups are set for Saturday in U Sports, with St. Mary's taking on St. FX in the Loney Bowl, Laurier facing Queens in the Yates Cup, Saskatchewan clashing with their rival Regina in the Hardy Cup, and the aforementioned Laval Rouge et Or taking on Montreal. Which game are you most excited for, Hodge?
I think I have to go and call me a Canada West homer, but I'm thinking the Hardy Cup, all Saskatchewan, the 2 top teams in Canada West. Tough to beat that. The BC Lions defensive coordinator, Mike Benavides, said he's never seen a defensive player step as seamlessly into a starting role as Canadian safety Jackson Finlay, with the closest being Adam Bighill. Is that high praise deserved?
Well, it's certainly high praise, and I don't think Jackson Finley's going to win multiple MODPs and be a first ballot Hall of Famer like Adam Bighill will be. But 4 interceptions in your first 4 career starts, and the down-to-down production he's been able to make since taking over from Christophe Beaulieu has been a revelation. He is a legitimate top-flight guy in this league, and it's astounding that he fell all the way into the second round. Montreal QB Davis Alexander took issue with some comments made by Winnipeg defensive end Willie Jefferson and fired back ahead of their semifinal playoff matchup. Then he backed it up and torched the Bombers. Is this a perfect lesson in not poking the bear?
Davis Alexander seems to think so. I believe his direct quote after the game was, the Bombers woke up the wrong team. Alexander putting the league on notice. Let's see if he can continue firing off at the mouth and using that right arm to get the Alouettes to a Grey Cup and ultimately win the CFL championship. The CFL unveiled the finalists for all 7 major individual player awards. Did the voters get them right, though?
I mean, I didn't have any problems with the results. My issue was more, I didn't think we got it all right at the team level. So I felt a little silly making some of my votes. Like, as we talked about on the show, I think the most outstanding defensive player nominees should have been Jalen Hutchings from the West and Tyrese Beverette from the East, and neither player was available. But I did like the selections that were there based off of the team nominations. I just wish the team nominations were a little more in line with what I thought. Edmonton Elks general manager Ed Hervey was non-committal regarding the future of veteran linebackers Niles Morgan and Nick Anderson, stating that he feels the players at that position are, quote, replaceable, unquote. Was that out of line?
I appreciate that people get upset when Ed Hervey is harsh, but he's not wrong here. Linebacker is a more plug-and-play position, and they've got 2 great ones in-house in Joel DeBlanco and Brock Mogensen, both of whom played sensational down the stretch. I suspect Nick Anderson will be back because he's younger, and I think he still has more upside, but Niles Morgan has probably played his last game for the Edmonton Elks. The Edmonton Elks signed Canadian cornerback Tyrell Ford to a contract extension last week, keeping him as the CFL's highest paid DB, despite his twin brother Trey's uncertain future with the team. Did that surprise you, Dunk?
It didn't surprise me. It's professional football. You have to view them as individuals as much as they have played together all the way through university. They started their professional careers on different teams. It's worth noting Tyrell Ford will earn $230,000 in hard money. He is far and away the highest defensive back in this league in terms of compensation. Trey Ford, on the other hand, lots to be decided there. Ottawa Redblacks fullback Marco Dubois said he was, quote, ashamed, close quote, by his team's season, adding that he struggles to look fans in our nation in the eye. Is he right to feel that way?
Absolutely. I would be very disturbed if a guy who is a long tenured Red Black at this point was like, yeah, well, you know what? We have a great culture and we love playing together. It's like, you're losing all the time. And you have, other than last year where you went to the playoffs, you've lost consistently dating back before the pandemic. Like, I love this quote from Marco Dubois. This is the attitude that Ottawa needs. The status quo is unacceptable. We need to get back to the playoffs. Why? Because fans in the nation's capital deserve that. Period. The Canadian senior men's national team is set to return to Europe this week for a round-robin tournament with Italy and Germany. How fierce will the competition be?
Well, it'll be more fierce than when they played Italy in April, which was a 56-0 drubbing against an Italian team that was missing most of their best players for that matchup. They'll be full strength this time around. Canada should still take care of business fairly easily, but it's worth noting these are not the top 2 teams in Europe. They're the 2 teams that met in the bronze medal game of the European Championships. Austria and Finland, respectively, beat these 2 teams in the semifinals of the European Championship. So Canada, you better circle those 2 teams as the guys you've got to beat if you want to claim international supremacy. Canadian quarterback and MOP finalist Nathan Rourke told you, Dunk, that he has no plans to explore the NFL again. Do you believe him?
I do. I think he's seen it up close. He admitted that it seemed like at the time when he went down there and signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars that the grass might be greener on the other side. He's very appreciative of being able to come back to the Canadian Football League and the opportunity that he has been granted by Amar Doman and the BC Lions to be their long-term franchise quarterback, and also, the paycheck to match the highest paid player in the league at well over $600,000. The Saskatoon Hilltops and Okanagan Sun are set to meet Sunday in the Canadian Junior Football League's Canadian Bowl National Championship game. Who are you picking to win the Natty?
This game is taking place in Saski, so you got to roll with Saski. I know the Okanagan Sun have won this recently, but I'm on the Hilltops. Arguably the top ever franchise in the CJFL. I'm not gonna pretend to be a CJFL expert, but I do know that the Hilltops can ball. Okay, that's inarguable. The BC Lions took issue with defensive tackle Jonah Tavai's omission from the West Division All CFL team, telling voters to ask offensive linemen, quote, who the F they think, close quote. And it wasn't just F. There was a bad word there. Do you think they have the right to be mad?
I do. Jonah Tavai should have been the West Division All-Star at defensive tackle alongside Jalen Hutchings. With all due respect to Micah Johnson, who I think had a solid season, I don't even think he's the best defensive tackle on his own team. In fact, I think he's the third best defensive tackle on his own team because I think Mike Rose played better and more consistent. And I think Caleb Saunders has higher upside. Now, is he still in the top half of D tackles in the league? Top 10? Absolutely. But I don't think he was deserving of the All-Star nod this time around. The Saskatchewan provincial government has officially tabled a bill to make tailgating legal for Rough Riders home games in 2026. Is this democracy at its finest, Dunk?
I suppose it depends on your individual definition of democracy, but I just can't understand how this hasn't happened in Saskatchewan yet. You have tailgating at other stadiums around the Canadian Football League, not all of them, but other ones. But with the following that the Riders have, like, this is long overdue.
Finally, on a somber note, 3DownNation would like to express its deepest condolences to the family and friends of Darius Hartshorn, who passed away this week at the age of 17 after an injury sustained in a Winnipeg high school football game. Him and his family are in our thoughts at this tragic time. For Justin Dunk and JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. We will see you later this week, JC and I, for our picks for the East and West Finals. Sign up for our newsletter at 3downnation.com and enjoy the games, folks. There's only 3 of them left before the long, cold, at least where I live, off season.